Hi, everybody. Welcome to this webinar, which is on analyzing student work as formative assessment. So this is a part of a series of formative assessment webinars. And today we are going to be talking about student work, and we are going to be looking a little bit carefully about the ways that we can use student work to analyze data. So let's start with, first off, let's start talking about why do we analyze student work? Like, what would be the reason for us to do that? So analyzing student work has a lot of benefits to it. Particularly, you can identify if students are learning and if the teaching practices are effective. So when you look through their work, you can see, you know, are they retaining what was taught? Are they understanding concepts? You'll be able to look through their work and see that, and that's going to also help you see if your teaching practices were effective or not. Because sometimes, you know, maybe a child will write something in, you know, a summary that they wrote and makes you think, oh, they didn't quite understand that lesson or concept, so I think I want to go reteach that another time. Another reason why you want to analyze student work is it's going to help you understand student needs and refine your teaching practices. So, you know, you may look through the work and you're going to realize, oh, I think that the way that I taught that concept didn't really reach this child based upon their work. It doesn't look like they're understanding it. So I'm going to reteach in a different way. I'm going to find a different way to do this because, really, a formative assessment is supposed to drive our instruction, and it's going to help us learn how we can reach the child best. And so student work is just a great way of looking at things, looking at what they know and figuring out where they need to go. So you also want to analyze student work because you want to be able to identify their strengths. You'll be able to see in their work, you know, wow, you know, this child has a really amazing understanding of how to create voice when they are writing a story. They really can make the characters come alive. And this can kind of help you not only, you know, identify what their strengths are, but really build upon those strengths. And you can also bring in, you know, those strengths and interests into other areas of the curriculum. You also want to identify or analyze student work in order to identify additional learning needs. Maybe you're going to see that a child is misspelling certain words frequently, or there are certain spelling patterns that aren't working, or that they are, you know, reversing their letters so that they are backwards, and you're maybe noticing these things over and over when you look through their work. Or maybe you're going to see that they forget to put capital letters, or they forget some grammar and punctuation, and you see patterns. So this is something where you're going to identify some additional learning needs that can help you plan for future instruction. So analyzing student work also will identify if a student has developed sufficient skills to move on to the new learning. So you can look, and maybe you were working with a Montessori math material or some sort of a manipulative, and then the child brought it to paper, and you see that they're having a hard time understanding how to add with regrouping or multiply with two-digit multipliers. You're going to be able to see in their work, you know, oh, you know, they are not understanding, you know, with a two-digit multiplier that we need to, where we need to put an extra zero and move things over. You'll be able to see that. So then you can really plan for, okay, I need to give this child another lesson or a mini lesson, or pull in some extra strategies to help them. You also want to analyze work because it identifies if student has developed sufficient skills to move on to new learning. So you're just going to be like, you look through their work and you're like, okay, I think that they're ready to move on to the next step. They really understand this concept. They know what I was teaching them, and they have a grasp of it, and they're ready to move on. You'll also want to analyze student work because it'll help you as a teacher better understand how to support your students. Because you're going to see all sorts of things when you look at their work. You're going to see, oh, maybe I need to help them practice their handwriting a little bit. Or, oh, maybe, you know, I see that this child really enjoys writing about things that have to do with science. So maybe we can capitalize that and really go more deeply into science. So it's just going to really, looking at their work is going to help you support them even better. Another reason why you want to analyze student work is that it's going to offer you an accurate, comprehensive, and timely diagnosis of student needs. So the thing is, if you're giving your child a test, usually the test will come later on and you use a test to measure what was learned. But when you are analyzing student work, you're looking at it you're looking at it in real time, in the moment, and you get it, the child does the work, you look at it, the feedback is pretty quick, and you look at it and go, oh, I need to readjust my plan right now, instead of waiting until an exam is given, you know, months down the road. So the feedback is pretty immediate, and it's also comprehensive because you get to see all sorts of things about your students and their student work that you wouldn't be able to see in a standardized test. So let's think about some questions that you will want to ask before you start analyzing student work. So there's some questions to keep in mind. First of all, you want to think about, what work should I be analyzing? You know, are you going to be analyzing every single piece of work they do? Are you going to have them keep a portfolio of their best work and you're going to analyze that? Are you going to periodically jump into their folder and analyze some of their unfinished work and see where they kind of come to stopping points? These are things that you want to think about. There's actually not a right or wrong answer. It's more of like an inquiry for you, like what are you analyzing? What are you looking at? Another thing you want to think about is, what should I be looking for? What are you looking for? Are you looking for penmanship? Are you looking for variety? Are you looking for complete thoughts? Are you looking for lots of, details and illustrations with their work? You need to think about, what is it that I'm looking for? Am I looking for accuracy? Am I looking for things that they are interested in that I didn't know about and I see that they're interested in based upon what they wrote about? You're going to want to look at all of those things. You also want to think about, when do we look at the work? Are you analyzing their work every day? That might be a little too much. I'm just going to kind of throw that out there, because looking at every student's work every day would be really daunting. Are you planning on looking at it every week, every month? Are you looking at it, after school? Are you looking at it with the child? So, I know in Montessori settings, a lot of times we will look at work with children and ask them questions and talk to them about their work. So think about, when do you want to look at the work? You also want to think about, what information about the analysis should be captured? Do you want to take that, you're going to want to take the information and use it in other settings so that it can drive your future instruction and inform your future instruction. So you want to think about what information about the analysis. Let's say you looked through somebody's research reports and you see that they have a really hard time transitioning between their paragraphs so that it makes sense. And so, that's something that's an assessment you made based upon, looking in their work. And so that's a really important thing, okay, I am capturing this idea here that this child has a hard time transitioning between paragraphs, and therefore I'm going to be setting up and planning for a lesson for that child so that they can work on that and improve in that area. You also want to think about, what can the analysis of student work reveal that no other data can provide? So again, you know, we can give children quizzes and they can take standardized tests, and you know, they can take computerized tests, and those things just offer a very narrow window of what is possible. But you know, if you are doing this so that if you're looking through student work and you're getting really deep into it, you can find all sorts of interesting things. You can see what the children's interests are, what they value, what they find easy, what they find challenging. You might find out, you know, things about their lives when they're writing to you, and things that you didn't even know about that can help inform you and give you insight as to why they're having obstacles in certain areas. Sometimes the analyzing student work helps in the social and emotional realm as well. If a child is having difficulty and you're analyzing their writing, you may, you know, get some little ideas or insights as to why they're having a hard time based upon the things they say in their writing. So let's talk about the idea that student work is actually data. So a lot of people think, you know, how can student work be data? You know, it's, you know, scribbled on a piece of paper, or it's an illustration stuffed in their notebook. You know, this is student work and it seems very subjective. How can we make it into data? Because data is something we think of as objective, right? And it is. So this student work can provide information about what the students know, about what they're able to do, and also what they value. I mean, those three things right there are really the key things that we need to know as teachers about our students, and their work is able to provide that much more so than other measurements can. We also, student work also allows us to see the students' thought process, their decision making, their problem solving abilities, and their creativity. And this is the neatest thing about student work, is you really do get to see their thought process. And even sometimes you can't see their whole process, their whole thought process. You can just see parts of it. However, that's okay, because you can then go and sit down with the child with the work and say, you know, I think I understand your thinking around this, but let me ask you a little bit more about it, or can you tell me a little bit more about your thought process around this? And again, you can learn a lot of information from what the students are thinking with their work, and how they describe their work. Also, another really important thing to think of and keep in mind is that the work that the student generates says as much about the teacher as it does about the student. So I have seen, you know, as a person who has visited many different classrooms, I've seen a variety of different student work. I have seen classrooms where the student work is very prolific, that there is a lot of it, and they have used beautiful borders and careful illustrations and really nice handwriting. And then I will go in the classroom next door, and the student work is, you know, papers are flying everywhere, half ripped and stuffed into a notebook, and, you know, not looking like somebody took their time to make it beautiful or put like some effort into making it into quality work. So the work that the student generates, you know, it has a lot to do with you as a teacher and the way that you are valuing work, and the pride that you put on work, and the pride that you put in on the end product with the work, and how you transmit that to the child. So these are important things to think about. So student work is informed by many factors. It is informed by the students' interests. So again, in a Montessori setting where children have a lot of choice in the work that they do, is largely informed by their interests. Student work is also informed by motivation, and that motivation can come from an inner motivation, or it could be an external motivation, like a teacher who has enticed them, or it inspired them and sparked their interest, or it could be their fellow peers as well. Usually, you know, motivation is either internal, or it comes from the teacher, or it comes from the peers. Student work is also informed by abilities. So you'll see varying level of abilities, and your students' work will be reflecting in the variety of abilities in your classroom. So you need to keep that in mind. When you're looking at work, you don't want to really necessarily be comparing students with each other. What you want to do is compare a student with themselves. You want them to look at their progress and see how they're progressing over time and noticing their growth, and rather than comparing where they either are better than or fall short with the other people in their classroom. Student work is also informed by the level of support that they receive. Are they in a classroom with, you know, 40 students and one teacher, and they're a struggling student and they aren't getting enough support to be able to do the best work that they want to do, or you know, really understand the lesson or the assignment? Or are they getting a lot of support, you know, and do they have a lot of scaffolding and support that can help them reach greater heights and learn more things? Student work is also informed by language proficiency. So, you know, this is an obvious thing to most people, but if the child is learning a second language and they're in the classroom, their work output is going to be different. It's going to, they're going to have, you're going to be needing to look at their work from a different lens, rather than somebody who is fluent in the language that you are speaking in the classroom. Student work is also informed by, as I sort of mentioned earlier, the social and emotional realm. So, you know, your student's work may be affected by, you know, if they had, you know, a grandparent pass away, or they've been very sick, or maybe they have a parent who is getting a divorce, or, you know, right now we're living in the middle of a pandemic and their work might be adversely affected because they're feeling anxiety around that. So these are things to keep in mind when you are looking at student work, that there are a lot of factors that go into the students' work and how their work, how their work progresses, and the product of their work. So let's talk about this idea that student work shows us what they know. So we want to really focus on the students' strengths. We want to talk about what they know, what they're able to do, and what they value. We want to look at those things. You know, it's really easy as a teacher. It can be quite natural to, you know, be the kind of person who notices their grammar errors, their incomplete thoughts, their spelling and punctuation mistakes. However, you really want to resist that temptation, and you don't want to be focusing on what's missing in their work. You want to focus on what's there, and you want to build upon what's there, because that's really the way that you are going to reach your student, and you're going to help them reach greater heights. If you build upon their strengths rather than focusing on their deficiencies. So you just really want to be really gentle about focusing on things that they might need to be working on, and really do it in a positive way. So there are a variety of different types of student work. In a Montessori classroom, or in a classroom that is focused on hands-on, experiential, and project-based, you're going to find a more variety of student work than you would find in a traditional classroom, where, you know, maybe they would tend to be doing a lot of paper and pencil work with worksheets and whatnot. So a few different types of student work that you will be able to analyze are projects. And a lot of people, you know, don't think about, oh, these three-dimensional projects that these children create are beautiful things for us to analyze. And, you know, it might be something that, you know, of course, a lot of teachers will take work home from students to look at and analyze, and you can't take their big diorama or sculpture that they made or whatnot you can always go around and take pictures from all angles and then take that and analyze it in that way if you want to take it home. Or you can look at it at school too. But projects are, something that you can analyze. You also want to look at their research reports and their creative writing. There's all sorts of creative writing, and reports often also contain beautiful illustrations. And in those reports, you're going to be looking at, do they transition between paragraphs? Does everything make sense? Is it in an order? Is it in a sequence? Is this engaging to the reader? You're going to want to really look at those things. Another kind of student work are presentations, and presentations are fun. They often involve a student who has created some sort of a project, and they have some sort of a story or report that accompanies that, and they share their information about that. And so that's something you can do. And, you can also really analyze their oral presentation skills as well, and really help them brush up on those oral presentation skills, because, as we get into the 21st century, people are doing a lot of presentations on Zoom and YouTube and all of these platforms where their speaking skills need to be really refined in order to be people doing that. And so we are, are going to be teaching our children to do that. That presentations are a type of student work to look at. We also have portfolios, and students put their beautiful work in portfolios. It's like a little bound booklet, and you can look through their student work and really go deeply. What's beautiful about portfolios is it's almost like a timeline that you have in a bound folder, where you can see from beginning to end the progression of a student and how far they've come in terms of their handwriting, in terms of their development of topic sentences and supporting sentences, and in terms of all of their, writing mechanics and expression, and their illustrations. And you can also, obviously look at their math progression. So portfolios are a wonderful way to look, and also look with the children. They often get very excited and surprised to see how far they've come from one end to another. And these portfolios are also a great way for you to look and see, where are some gaps that the child has that I need to fill in. Oh, they're having a hard time understanding how to put quotations with dialogue. Oh, I think I need to go back and give them a lesson about that. Oh, they have a hard time understanding where one paragraph ends and another one begins. So you're going to see these things in the work that they have. They also have a work journal where they record the work that they're doing, and then you can kind of see patterns with their work journal. You can analyze their work journal as a source of student work, where you look and say, oh, it looks like I'm looking through this, and this child has been really doing a lot of math for the last couple of weeks, but I noticed they haven't done a whole lot of writing, and I'm wondering why that is. And I'm curious about, what that's about. And then you can also have some conferencing with the child and sort of get some of their insight as well. So let's talk about what kind of information can be gathered from student work. There's so much that you can get from student work. It's way more than you can get from almost any, I think, from any other source of information about the child, other than maybe asking the child themselves. But actually, you can get more probably from student work, especially from quieter children who tend to write things down more. So what can we gather when we look at student work? What can we glean? What kinds of things can we learn when we look at student work? We can see if a student is having difficulty with some spelling patterns. Maybe it's the same spelling pattern over and over that they are struggling with. And then you're going to think, okay, how can I make sure that I'm addressing this in a lesson with the child? You can see if a student is having difficulty organizing thoughts into a comprehensible narrative. If they write a story, or if they're writing a report and everything's sort of all over the place and it's not really making sense, there's not a sequence to it or a logical flow. That's something that you will see in their writing right away, and that's something you're going to want to help them develop. Children who struggle with not being able to have things in sequence when they're writing sometimes have some executive functioning delays, and it's something that you might want to help support them with, you know, and you're like, oh, I need to give them lessons on sequencing. And you can play a little game with them. You know, you can say, okay, what are the steps I need in order to brush my teeth? You know, what are the steps that need to happen? And then you can write on sentence strips all of the different steps. And you can have them kind of say it out loud, and they might not say it in a sequence, and that's okay. And then you can, you know, have a stack of sentence strips and say, okay, let's put these in an order. Let's put these in a sequence. So that's a great little side note tip that you can use for children who are having a hard time having difficulty organizing their thoughts. You can also look and see if a student is consistently not putting capital letters where they belong. Maybe they don't understand the difference between a proper noun and a common noun. Maybe you need to go back to the grammar box and revisit that lesson and revisit grammar lessons on proper and common nouns. Again, when it comes to a Montessori setting, we tend to not, when we're doing formative assessment, it is planning our future instruction. That means that we're not sitting there and evaluating the work and making marks of it right there. We don't have to do that. I mean, we might do that sometimes, and there's, you know, nothing wrong with doing that on occasion, but you really want to actually just take mental note or jot down some notes for yourself so that you are then using the information from the student work and planning for their future lessons, because this is going to help you know exactly what they need. So you're also going to be noticing if a child is forgetting to borrow when they're subtracting abstractly. Sometimes children, you know, when they're subtracting, they need to borrow from the next number, and they will forget that. You'll see that they're not doing that, you know, and that's something you can notice right away when you're looking through their work and think, okay, I need to take them back to the stamp game or the large bead frame, and we're going to revisit subtraction, and so that they can see that. Or maybe they even need to go to the golden beads and we can look at that one more time. So you want to make sure that you know, you are looking at their math work, and if they seem to be struggling abstractly, you can always revisit the material, and you can even revisit it in a new way or a different way. And because they might say, oh, I've already done this before, or I don't, you know, I already know this. And clearly you see that they maybe don't know that, but maybe they aren't aware they don't know it, or they're shy to admit they don't know it. And that's okay. You can just say, you know, I'm going to show you something just a little bit different about it this time. And you're going to have to think quickly about something different you will show them that involves that. Another thing you might notice when you're looking at student work is that their writing lacks voice, or it's devoid of descriptive adjectives. You know, it might be like, the boy walked down the street, he saw his friend, they went to the store, then they went to the park. And that's lacking voice, and it's perfectly fine, but you want to, you know, then you're going to be like, okay, I want to really help this child learn how to make their writing exciting and engaging so that people are drawn into it. So then you might want to get some examples of some picture books that you show them, and you say, okay, this is a really exciting story I'm gonna share with you, and it has a really great voice in this story, and so that they have an understanding of what that means. And you can give them another lesson that is going to help, you know, make more colorful, descriptive adjectives in their writing. You might notice that your student might need to practice the formation of letters so that their work is legible, whether it be cursive writing or print writing. Maybe they're having a hard time with legible handwriting, and so you're noticing, ooh, we need to sit down and work with their handwriting to make it more legible. Now, as an elementary person, I caution you from feeling like you have to make sure that the child is writing in print and cursive just as beautifully. A lot of times in elementary, they do pick one over the other, and you can certainly try to get them to want to be enjoying both of those things. But if they are the kind of person who is not really receptive to that and you want them to be writing, be just happy that they are writing more beautifully in one type of writing rather than in both. You might also notice that a student has been practicing long multiplication on the checkerboard for months, and they're resisting suggestions on moving towards abstraction. So you see in their work journal, they've written checkerboard, checkerboard. They've been doing it for a very long time, and you have suggested they go abstractly, and you haven't seen any evidence of that in their work journal. They are just doing the same thing. So then you want to look at what is the obstacle there. You know, what is preventing them from wanting to go abstractly? So speaking of looking at the obstacle, the next point I wanted to make is that when you are analyzing student work, you don't just want to really be looking at the surface. You want to look beneath the surface. You want to look beyond what is obviously stated and what is seen right away, because there's often so much to see. Your students are telling you a lot about themselves and their thought process with their work. You learn a lot about their thought process just looking in their work. Their work represents both conscious and unconscious decisions that they're making, because every work that they do, they're making a decision. Should I put an illustration? Should I not? Should I use cursive? Should I use print? Should I finish the story at the middle of the page, or should I go to the end of the page? I mean, these are just very small decisions that are being made, but they are making decisions all day long. So you want to kind of think about what kind of decisions did the child make when they were doing this work. Their work conveys what they think about a certain topic of study. It also conveys what they understand about social issues, and it could even convey how they make sense of a historical figure. So you're going to see, these are just examples, of course. These are not everything that the work conveys, but those are some examples of things that you can get from when you are looking at the student work. So there's a lot to be learned and a lot to be seen. So let's talk about questions that you want to ask while you're analyzing the student work. Because you want to be reflective while you're doing this. This is a reflective practice, and you want to ask yourself questions, and you want to be prepared with some questions. So I have a bunch of questions that I will go through, but this list is not exhaustive. There are many other questions you can ask yourself as well. But here's some that have come up frequently when I've analyzed student work, or when other people I've worked with have analyzed student work. So the first one would be, what led the student to approach the problem in this way? So when you're looking at a child did some sort of a math problem, maybe they did some sort of an algebra problem, and you're like, this, I see that they're not getting the correct answers. What could possibly be the reason why they approached the problem in this way? And so again, this is giving you some curiosity so that you can really do some analysis here. We want to try to leave our judgments and our evaluations out of, well, we will evaluate later on sort of at the end, but you want to really try to leave judgments out of this and be asking yourself questions. You also want to might want to ask yourself, how did the student come up with the wrong answer while following a reasonable, logical process? Maybe they have like some sort of a guide step. Maybe you even wrote down, here are the steps, and they still struggled with it. You want to kind of think about, how did they come up with the wrong answer while they still had this guideline? Are they having a hard time with visual processing? Maybe they aren't reading this, you know, reading the steps, then they read them in a different order. There could be all sorts of reasons why. Another question you will want to ask is, what is the relationship between what the student produced and the question that you asked them to consider? So you might have said, you might have talked about, you know, did a lesson and you suggested a follow-up, and then the child does some sort of follow-up work and it has nothing really to do with what the work was, or it's very different than something that you would have expected. So maybe like there's a relationship between what they produced and what the lesson was that you're not seeing. So you might want to consider and think about that, because sometimes children take us very literally and we think we are being very clear in our explanations of things, and we're really not. So we have to be careful and mindful of that. So, you know, another question to ask is, how similar is the quality of writing in their creative writing versus their research reports? Maybe you have a child who's very imaginative and they love creative writing and they write these amazing, fantastical stories. But then when it comes to research reports, they just write like half a paragraph, if that, and you can hardly get anything more. As much as you try, you're like, you know, trying to inspire them to go deeper with it, and they're just not into it. So there might, you know, is in that instance, the quality of their writing is very dissimilar. So why is that? Maybe because they love the creative writing. Is there a way you can bridge the creative writing and the research reports so that they can love research reports even more? Again, these are questions you want to ask to try to inform your planning and your teaching, so that that will help drive your future instruction of the child and help them develop skills and mastery. Another question you might want to ask is, what are the next steps in teaching this student? So maybe you have looked through their work and you see that, oh, this child has been doing long division with a single divisor, with a one-digit divisor, and they are very adept at that. They've been doing this for days and days. There's, you know, they do long problems, short problems, but like it looks like they're really ready to abstract to a two-digit divisor. So you see that they've done one-digit divisor, you look at their work, you're like, okay, they've gotten all these right, they look like they're on fire with it, it's time for us to go abstract with the two-digit divisor. So, so that's an example of thinking about what are the next steps in teaching this student. Another very important question, I think this is one of the more important questions to ask while analyzing student work, is there any reteaching that needs to occur? So maybe you are, the child has been doing some writing and you're noticing that they need some reteaching when it comes to prefixes or suffixes, and they're struggling with that in their writing, and you need to reteach some of those lessons. You might notice that they need some reteaching of a division with a one-digit divisor before they go into a two-digit divisor. Maybe they left one-digit long division to the side for a while, and now you need to kind of reteach that before you go into division with a two-digit divisor. You also want to ask, this is also a really important question to ask. I'm sorry, they're actually all very important, but sometimes I see one and I say, yes, that's so important. You want to ask, how can this work be extended to deepen the child's understanding? So again, like, you are always looking at ways we can extend their work, that we can make it longer, more elaborate, and the children love doing big work too. So if you can find a variety of different kinds of big work for them to do, whether it be a poster or a booklet or a timeline or a diorama, or something on the, maybe they make a PowerPoint, I don't know. You want to, you know, think about how can we extend and deepen this work, and to help them really have a strong understanding of the content or the material, or be able to develop the skill. You also want to ask yourself, was there anything that made you curious and want to know more about this child? You know, maybe you're seeing that this child is writing about fishing all the time. Maybe they like to go fishing in the lake on the weekends and they're talking about that. And maybe you want to know a little bit more about their experience with fishing. And, you know, is there a way that you can connect that to biology with the child, or ecology? So, you know, if these kinds of things might make you curious to want to know more. If you see they're writing a bunch about fishing, you want to know more about their interest in fishing. You're going to also want to ask yourself, do I see any patterns emerging? So if you're seeing patterns emerging, that is you know, that is going to help inform your instruction too. Like, you know, that you see that there's a lot of writing happening and they don't have very much math in their portfolio, and you're thinking, well, gosh, I think we need to really I need to really ramp up my math instruction and make it more exciting and somehow connect math to writing if I can with this child. So you want to look and see, are there any patterns? You also want to ask yourself, is there anything surprising or unexpected that I see here that I wasn't expecting to see? So that's something you'll want to ask yourself. And you'll want to ask about, another fun thing is to ask, you know, if you have their portfolio, for example, like what is one of your favorite pieces of this student work? And what is it about this work that you liked? You know, that sounds a little subjective, and it kind of is, but there are things that we like and we don't like, and it's really good for us to identify that. And what's even better to do is sit down with the child and with their portfolio and sort of analyze their work together, only they're analyzing it and you're supporting it. And you can ask them, what is your favorite piece of work that you've done? And what is it about this work that you liked? So this is a really great way to help them do some self-assessment and really look at that. And then that's going to also kind of inform how you are going to be working with them in the future as well. You also, you know, want to like look at their work and think, what lesson do you think they might be ready for next and why? So when you review their work, you might say, oh, okay, this child has done the parts of the leaf and they seem very excited about plants. They've done lots of illustrations of the leaf and learning about different leaves in different parts of, in different biomes. And so I think this child is ready for a lesson on parts of the root. So, you know, let's keep them going because they're excited. You also want to ask yourself, looking through the work, is there, you know, any lesson you think that they might benefit from repeating? This is also reteaching. So reteaching and repeating are almost the same. So when you reteach a concept, you might reteach it in a different way. Whereas if you repeat a lesson, you will probably do it in the same way. But children in elementary years often don't really want a lesson repeated more than maybe once or twice. And then you want to reteach the concept using different materials, a different approach, and whatnot. You also want to ask yourself, are there any questions that you can ask the student so that you can further clarify about the work that they have that you are trying to look at? So sometimes you may be looking through the student work and you aren't 100% sure about what you're looking at or what the goal was or the outcome if it's their own follow-up work and they have chosen it. So you can certainly ask the student questions about their work, and that's an important thing to do as well. So here you have done all of this analyzing of the student work, and you're asking questions and you're looking. So after analyzing the data, you're going to want to take some action. So you're going to do all this analysis, you're going to look at the work, you're going to come up with some conclusions, you've asked a bunch of questions, then you're going to give some specific feedback to the child, which would be some information that they could use on how to improve. And so again, what the feedback could be is you're reteaching the lesson, but sometimes it might be just a little quick, you know, hey, I noticed that you were forgetting some periods in your creative writing. You're forgetting to put periods at the end of your sentences. So going forward, try to remember to do that. So giving them some feedback. You also want to do some investigation. You want to check in with the student and make sure that you get more information on what they were thinking about, just to make sure that you are not solving the wrong problem. Sometimes you might look at student work and you think that they are talking about a certain thing or something's happening when they really actually had a very different idea and there was a different intent. So if you're not sure, you really want to clarify, do some investigation and clarify with the student to make sure that what you are seeing and what you are observing and what you have come to is reflects, you know, what the student had in mind. Again, after analyzing the data, you want to reteach or re-engage the child. You want to help them understand the concept in a different way, because in elementary, a lot of repetition happens through variety. So let's say you're realizing they still don't have their multiplication facts down. You know, they can practice their multiplication facts through using the bead bars or using the checkerboard, but you could also have flashcards. You could have a deck of cards, of playing cards, and children can play card games that help them learn their math facts. They can bounce a ball and do skip counting to learn, you know, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, and so on, to learn their threes. So you want to give them a variety of opportunities. Another thing after you analyze all the data is you want to move on with the child. You see that mastery has taken place. They really understand a certain concept that you were trying to show them. And now it's time for the student to move on to the next concept. So that's a way you're going to be taking action. So again, all of this analyzing of student data, the main purpose is to inform your future instruction and where you need to go with the child. You also want to look at extensions and follow-up work. So you want to offer opportunities for the students to do a really deep dive after mastery has taken place, if they're so interested. This can really help, you know, ignite their excitement and enthusiasm and also cement the learning that has taken place. And that's a really valuable thing for them because that's going to fuel them and inspire them, and you're going to get the best work out of them if they're really excited in that way. So, how can we use work samples to plan for future lessons? I mean, we've been talking about this, but I wanted to give a little concrete example, okay? So let's say while you're reviewing some work samples, you notice that a few students are not using quotation marks when they're writing dialogue. A few students are consistently not accurately solving fraction problems with uncommon denominators. And then you maybe have a couple of children who are confusing the adverb with the preposition. And then maybe you have a handful of children who understand the process of abstract multiplication, but they don't really have their multiplication facts down. So what are the solutions to this? You can think about that for a minute. Like, what are some possible solutions that you can devise for these potential challenges that you could be coming across? But I will tell you the answer to this solution is that you're basically going to plan for some small group lessons, and you're going to reteach. So you're going to pull those few kids who you know are struggling with using quotation marks when writing dialogue, and you're going to give them a lesson. You're going to pull the children who are struggling with fraction problems with uncommon denominators, and you're going to reteach the lesson. So you're going to observe, and you're going to look at their work, and you're going to see, you know, who's struggling with what and who is really being successful where, and you're going to make your plans accordingly. So you also, another really important thing to mention, and this is sort of the final part of this webinar, is that you don't want to be analyzing student work all by yourself. I mean, certainly you can do that sometimes. There's nothing wrong with that. But what really makes it a very powerful and effective way of a formative assessment is if you come together with some colleagues and you do it together. And I have done this before as a professional development opportunity in the network of schools that I worked with. I asked all of the teachers to come together from the different schools and to bring a couple of portfolios from different children. I asked them to bring 3, actually. I asked them to bring a portfolio of a child who tends to struggle more with things. I asked them to bring a portfolio of a child who's sort of in the middle, you know, they're doing just fine. And then I asked them to bring a portfolio of a child who is excelling in all areas and a really strong and prolific student. And so we did that and looked through the different samples. And the thing is that it's actually quite vulnerable for teachers to bring in their students' work samples and share them with other people, because as I mentioned earlier, the students' work is a little bit of a reflection on you and what you're doing in the classroom. So it takes a great deal of trust to do this, but I think it's very important and worthwhile for teachers to come together in small groups, and they can share each other's work and kind of ask each other questions. So an ideal thing would be for teachers to meet once a month to examine student work from other classrooms. Once a month is probably ideal. It might be not easy to do once a month. Maybe you're doing it once a quarter or once a semester. But you definitely want to make time for it at least a couple of times during the school year. And then the colleagues will discuss observations and questions that they have of student works without evaluating it. You know, maybe it will be one person's, you know, there'll be one student who's highlighted, and people will look at different samples of that student's work, and it might be passed around. And then afterwards, you know, that could take a good 15 minutes for the group to just look at all the different kinds of samples of work in a student's portfolio. Afterwards, the peers or the colleagues, you know, will ask questions like, or not ask questions always, but make observations and ask questions. Like, I noticed that this child really loves embedding illustrations in all of her creative writing. Or I noticed that this child has a huge portfolio, and you know, a majority of it is of lots and lots of math problems. You know, so these are things that you can notice. And again, your colleagues will often notice things that you might not notice, even simple things we don't always catch. And then you also might come with questions, curiosity questions. I wonder how this child decided to write about horses all the time. I wonder what made the child decide to write so much about horses. Do they have a horse at home? Are they interested in them? Just little questions like that. I wonder why this child, I notice, doesn't go to the bottom of the page when they write. They just write about half a page and then they go on to the next page. These are very simple, tiny little observations, but they can lead to really powerful discussions. And so, you know, these are like things to kind of put out there and just for people to share their observations and their noticings and their questions without evaluations. So there's no answering that needs to happen. They can just kind of, you can set up a system where, you know, people are making these statements or questions. And then after that time, you can then all come together as a team and brainstorm ideas for next steps for that child, and also identify what that child might need. You know, in what ways does that child need more support? And sometimes the way they need more support is they need more support in moving faster and more quickly through material because they're ready for so much more. In some ways, support looks like, oh, they are going to need some extra lessons in these other areas and they need repetition. And how can we help this child have more repetition with prefixes and suffixes and grammar and, you know, whatever the topic may be. So this is the ending part of this analyzing of student work with colleagues is brainstorming ideas for next steps and really identifying what the students need. So that concludes our webinar on analyzing student work as formative assessment. I hope that you all take the time to really go through your students' work and not only, you know, asking yourself curiosity questions and, you know, wondering about things, but also just really deeply appreciating the work that they do. Because when children feel their work is appreciated, they feel it makes them rise and elevate their work that they do, elevate what they produce for you, and also what they produce for themselves, because hopefully they're doing it mostly for their internal love and motivation of what they are doing. And it's also a really important and powerful thing to not analyze the work alone. You want to not only analyze it with your peers, as we just mentioned, and really, you know, really jump in and dive into doing that, because that can be such a rich and powerful experience. But you also want to analyze the work with the child. You want to sit down with them and say, let's look through your portfolio. What piece of work do you love in here? Why do you love it? Is there anything that you feel like you wished you could do over, or do you want to expand upon, or add more to? You know, there's all sorts of ways that you can analyze work and help the child become attuned to the language of analyzing their work too, in terms of helping them self-assess and inform their future planning for themselves as they become more independent and self-directed in that way. So I hope that these, I have raised some interesting and thought-provoking ideas and questions, and that you will be able to look at student data, that you are making sure that you're keeping their work and looking through it and talking with the children, and that you are using that student work that you have analyzed to plan and inform your future instruction, so that you are individuating and personalizing your instruction for all of the children in your class. Thank you very much, and it was wonderful being here, and I hope that you enjoyed this webinar, and you will probably see me in yet another webinar. Goodbye.